everyone. Thank you for signing up for my classes. I'm here today to show you a little bit about how to stretch watercolor paper and why we do it. So bear with me with the camera angle. This is new, so I hope it works. You might see the top of my head every once in a while. Apologies. So what kind of watercolor paper do I use? I get that question a lot. I actually really like Arches, and I usually use 140 pound, which is in the middle of 90 pound and 300 pound. 300 pound is really thick paper. You don't have to stretch it at all. 90 pound is a little too thin for me, so I like the 140. And I get it in sheets of 32 by 40, this is a part of that sheet. And I cut it down smaller to use because I usually paint pretty small. So that is the kind of paper that I love the best, and it's most cost efficient to stretch my own. So you're probably thinking, oh, I'm just a beginner, I don't want to stretch my own watercolor paper. I don't blame you. It took me about 30 years to figure out that this is the best way to do it. So thanks to one of my students. So here we go. You're gonna need paper. You're gonna need a little jelly roll pan or whatever your paper fits in, a receptacle of water, ruler, a stapler, staples, make sure you have staples, and a pencil and tape. And I think that's about it. Oh, and a board. So now you can't do this with regular foam core or wood, although people do say that they do it with wood. I wouldn't recommend it because I feel like the wood gets wet, expands, and contracts, and it's probably not the best way to do it. So there's this wonderful material called Gator Board. It's about, it's actually a ½ inch thick, and it has a very thick, plasticky covering on both sides. So you can reuse it. You can see the staples that I've used many times. So you can do that. And it becomes in really large pieces as well that I've cut down to the size that I like to work, the size that fits underneath my camera for my classes. So you get to do it any size you want. So I usually use a ruler because I like the deckled edge to get my watercolor paper the size I want it. And you'll see that this has a watermark on it, and it says Arches on it. And so if you don't like that, you can take it off. Sometimes I like it on my paintings. It gives a nice little texture to it. And I like words on my paintings anyway, so I don't mind it. And I usually draw little lines on the back. I don't know if you can see that, a pencil mark, so I know which one is the back and the front when I cut it down smaller, because you won't be able to figure that out. I also figured out a little hack to use my thinner metal ruler. It used to have a nice cork backing, but it does not have that anymore. And I like to cut it with that, which on one side leaves a nice deckled edge. It's the handmade look that comes with the paper. On the other side, not so much, but it'll do. So put the side that I'm not using anymore away, and you need a little timer. So I'm gonna talk a little bit while it's in the water about other paper that you can use if you don't want to do this for our classes, but this is really, it's just a great way to do it. And they call it stretching, but you're not technically stretching or pulling it onto the board, but I'll talk a little bit about that in my class as well at some point. So you put the paper in the water and you make sure you get water on both sides. There we go. And you stick it in there for, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Usually about 7 minutes, I'll put it in there. So I will have a list of the supplies that you need to do this process, but I forgot about the tape. So I can talk about that while that's soaking as well. So let me just get this ready for when I'm taking it out. Okay, so tape. I like to tape my stretched paper, but you don't have to tape it. If you don't tape it, you get little pools of watercolor around the staples. So if you don't want to tape it, it's fine, but you are going to have that happen. So, and I like to cover up the tape because also when you cover up, the staples, you get a really clean white border around your painting, which if someone mats it and puts it in a frame, you're not really going to see that little white border, but it's just nice to finish a painting, take it off, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well while we're waiting for the paper to soak. So that's why I used tape. So there's a couple different kinds of tapes you can use. You can use white artist tape. This is too thin. It's, I think it's a 1/2 inch. It's a little too thin for what I'm doing with my staples, how far I like to put the staples into the paper. So I tend to use a little thicker, and the white tape comes in all different widths. So 3/4 of an inch or an inch, this is an inch, this works fine. This is just regular painter's tape, Scotch blue tape. Someone recommended that you use the yellow on the inside, blue tape, but yellow on the inside because it comes off easier. This does sometimes rip my paper, but also I haven't used it, so I can't really recommend it, but one of my students did say that that comes off easier and it does not rip the paper. So just remember it has a yellow insert on the cardboard. And you can probably use other tapes too if you have them lying around. Just practice with some. While it's soaking, I'm going to tell you a little bit about other ways of painting on paper. So you can get a pad of paper, but when you get the pad of paper, and the reason why we're stretching our paper is because when you get the pad of paper, it's not glued down anywhere except for the top. So when you put water on paper, anything that's made of pulp, right, or porous, it's going to buckle, okay? It's gonna look like a wave, right? And it's hard to paint on. It's very challenging to paint on. And there's not really any great way of not having that happen other than you can tape it down to just a piece of masonite or something like that, or even just right onto the table. That's kind of the hacker way to stretch paper without actually doing it. And it does work a little bit, but I found that honestly stretching it is the best way to go. So you can get a pad, you can get a journal, but again, it's only going to be attached on one side, so you're going to get a lot of buckling and warping of the paper. What I've been doing over the past 30 years of painting with watercolor is I usually paint on a block. This just happens to be a round one because it's the only one I have right now in my closet. I've never had a round block of watercolor paper before, but I was super excited, so I bought it. So the block of watercolor paper comes and it's glued all the way around, except for there's a little space where there's no glue, so you can stick a knife in there and get the piece of paper up so that you can, you paint one painting at a time. So I'll show you actually how it's done. And they've even glued the top on, which is usually how it comes. So you just, stick a knife in there and carefully, not carefully as I just did that, you carefully rip this would be the top page off, but when you're done with your watercolor painting, you would do that to the next page. I'm not going to rip it off here because I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to waste a piece of paper. That was my dog yawning. So again, they have a little thing that you can put your knife into very carefully, not too sharp of a knife because I've ripped the paper before. So just very carefully, and you pull each page off at a time. So you paint the whole painting, and when it's dry, you take it off. My dog wants to talk to you all. Okay, so let's see, I think I've talked about everything so far, the kinds of paper, all the supplies you need. It's still soaking, so I can show you how to take it off while it's soaking. So very carefully, you're gonna peel the tape back, and you're gonna peel it on an angle away from your painting, not towards your painting, because you don't want it to rip the paper. And this is the best way that I've found that works. So just carefully pull it off. And I'm gonna show you how to take the painting off as well, because I just had someone ask me how to do that, and I'm sure there's many ways. As I always tell my students, there's many ways from point A to point B. So if you find a better way, you can let me know and I will share that. But this is how I do it. It's a little messy, sticks to you, but here we go. Oops. Just make sure if you're gonna rip it, you're gonna rip it away from the painting, not towards the painting. There we go. Okay, so you get this nice clean border around your painting, and then you can take that same butter knife and you just want to gently push or pull off the paper. Oops. And just be careful not to hurt yourself with the staples. And just pull it off really gently, and it should come off like that. This is, again, only one way to do it. There's many ways you can do it. If you have a staple remover, which I do not have, that would work. But then I just push the staples up. Sometimes I do it on the table. Push the staples up gently, and I carefully take them off. And if you have little children around or doggies like me, a dog like me, you want to put the staples somewhere safe. You don't want your dogs or your kids to play with the staples. So I just put them in a pile, and then you have your painting. And it's nice and flat. Okay, so that is that. We're gonna take the paper out of the bath of water. I just use cold water, clean cold water. You don't want to soak it for too much longer than 7 minutes, because there is a coating of watercolor ground on the paper that makes it watercolor paper, and you don't want that to soak off. You want it on there, okay? So you're going to place your paper down onto your Gator board. You're going to take your stapler, you're going to open it up, and then you're going to staple around the edges. And you can do it as close as you want to the edge. You can do it as close as you want to each other with the staples. For some reason my stapler does 2 staples every once in a while. Okay, so then you go all the way around. I put them about 1 inch away, sometimes a little further, just depends on how I'm feeling in the moment. Oops. I'm just gonna do the whole thing, even though you get the point, just because I don't want to ruin this piece of paper. My stapler's not liking to work today. Maybe it needs a vacation. Okay, so that's finished. Put that aside. I usually prep 2 or 3 pieces at a time because I have all the supplies out. So one of the reasons why watercolor paper has a surface, a watercolor ground on it, and other papers don't, that's why it's specifically called watercolor paper, is because it keeps the paint on the surface so you can push it around the surface without it bleeding into the paper right away. And that's what normal paper would do that's not watercolor paper. So that's why we use watercolor paper and not just regular drawing paper for our paintings. So I'm going to show you the whole process. It's not really in order because of the situation with the, soaking of the paper and all of that, but I want to show you every part of the process to show you that it's not difficult. I was really resistant to doing this in the beginning, and now I'm really excited that I've decided to do that. If you want it perfectly in a rectangle, then you're gonna have to do some measuring. I don't really care as much to get it perfectly in a rectangle. And since it's hand cut board, even if I lined the tape up with the edge, it still probably wouldn't be perfectly in a rectangle. But if you've ever taken any classes from me, you know that I don't really think that there's any such thing as perfect when you're doing handmade things. So then I usually just take my thumb and press it pretty hard, just once, going all the way around. And you have a beautiful surface that is so-called stretched to paint on. Now, while I'm painting, I like to blow dry it in between paint layers because I always like to paint on a flat surface. And even when you stretch your paper, it's still going to buckle a little bit, but not as much as if it weren't stapled down. So that's that. I really look forward to spending some time with you in January painting. I'll just do a little plug for my sunset class. We're going to do sunsets on Friday nights from 5 to 7 p.m. and that's Pacific time. And if you don't like watercolor, you can bring any material you'd like. Actually, for all of my classes, that's pretty much how it works, but you will always have the watercolor class on video to use later, but if you want to bring pastels or Inktense pencils or whatever that you're comfortable using, but I will be instructing Friday nights in watercolor. And then let's see, Sunday we have, what's my class on Sunday? Flowers, right? Yes. We're doing flowers from 1 to 3 p.m. So botanical, watercolors, or any material you would like to bring. And we're doing 4 different styles of botanical art in the 4 weeks. And then on Monday nights, back to 5 to 7 p.m., we are gonna be exploring shape, line, and color. So a little bit more abstract. So I hope to see you. You can email me at jennifermizuko33, the number 33 at gmail.com if you have any questions, or you can message me through my website, jennifermizuko.com. I really enjoy teaching and sharing my knowledge and learning from my students. So happy 2022, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks.